This week on the Sports Initiative podcast, I sit down with Bath City's current under-18 manager, Billy Clark. He discusses his personal coaching beliefs and methodologies, as well as discussing lessons learned from some of the top players and coaches in this country, like Glenn Hoddle and Harry Redknapp. I hope you enjoy. So good, Bill. How are things?
Yeah, really good. Thank you. Yeah, things are going well. My under-18's doing quite well. The university side have finished their programme now, but we're still training. Got very wet this morning, wet and very cold, but apart from that, we're still working.
So, obviously, for people that kind of don't know who you are, what are your roles? You've got quite a few.
Well, two main roles really. Yeah, my principal role is to manage the Bath City under-18s, which is in conjunction with Bath College. So that's the under-18 programme, and I assist Shay Wilson up here, who's the head of the football. I assist him, sort of first team coach role here with the university group, the first team squad.
And how do you find working with obviously slightly older players of the university sides, or people just coming out of school and stuff? Do you see a disparity between?
It's quite different. The quality is obviously higher here. The players are more mature, so you deal with that in a different way sometimes. What I find hard sometimes is when we do a session here in the morning, and sometimes I try and replicate the session with my under-18s, and sometimes it works, sometimes it just doesn't, and that's down to probably the quality, the understanding, and perhaps it's my expectations are perhaps too high sometimes, perhaps. But I do like to challenge the under-18s particularly, and they are a good group this year, so I can afford to challenge them and get a decent response normally. But like the tempo of how we train here is quite different to what the under-18s train at. It's probably the key thing to developing players, really, to replicate a tempo regularly, consistently, so that they can learn to play at a higher tempo, which sometimes is difficult because the under-18 group has got some good players in it, but there's quite a disparity between the top and the bottom of the group, and that sort of makes things difficult sometimes to keep a high level tempo of a session sometimes.
So obviously for you mentioned about there being disparity. How do you cater your sessions to? Because you want to still challenge both groups, but you don't want them to be overly challenged for the.
I in some ways I just have to accept that it's going to be slower, a lower level. So you end up sort of probably pitching it somewhere in the middle. So you're challenging probably the lower end of the group more than you are the higher end of the group, and the higher end of the group you can challenge in different ways in terms of asking them to do things different ways, and maintaining good habits really is something I talk about quite a lot. So whatever's going on in this session, they need to still do the right things, and become familiar with what's right and what's wrong, and what works and what doesn't work for them.
So for you, in your roles, do you see it as like a team development thing, or are you looking to develop individuals?
It's a bit of both, really. I think someone would contest this possibly, but do you develop the player before you develop the team? Does the player develop better in a team? So in that case, you probably develop the team first. But I'm trying to do it both ways, really, if I'm honest, because we're quite intense in terms of we have college fixtures, we have games on a Saturday as well. I want us to be competitive in that. So they need to understand their team role, formation, that kind of thing. And then develop the player from that. So I'd probably say I develop the team first before I start to develop the players.
So obviously, I guess one of the challenges for you is that every year you'll get kind of a new half of your group, if you like. So, and you're obviously having to go and recruit and all that type of stuff. How do you find kind of losing quite a lot of your corporate knowledge? Because obviously you would have worked with a group for 2 years. They probably understand the way you work and the way you want things done, and then they're gone, if you like. How do you find having to kind of almost press the reset button every year?
It's tough. It's tough, and it's not like you start with the same level of group every year. Occasionally you have a really good group, and then sometimes that can be followed up by a weaker group, and that makes it really, really hard because you can't even start at the same point you started the previous year. So that's hard, but it's probably the art of a coach, really, isn't it? Or one of the skills a coach needs to have to be able to pitch the sessions and ask the questions that challenge the players that you have, and not go beyond that, really.
So when you're recruiting and whatnot, and you're trying to get 16s come into your program, do you recruit what would you see as the best players for that group, or do you recruit like needs for, you know, that for example your second year is going next year, you don't have any centre halves, so therefore I'm going to need some centre halves?
Yeah, that is the case. I mean, recent years been very short of defenders, so we've taken probably more defenders out of one group than we normally would have done if we only needed one or two. And the thing is with the college program, we want it to be as elite as we possibly can make it. But sometimes you have to look at it and think, well, as long as we improve the players that come onto the program, then we've kind of done our job. So it is a balancing act because you need numbers. You need we run 2 squads on a Wednesday, which can be quite challenging.
And then do you look at just the technical side and think I can work with that technical player and he'll be able to fit what I do? Or
it's probably the only thing you can assess in trials. We run most of our intake will have come to 3 trials by the time we offer a place, and you do get to know their personality and their character from that. And I think you can sum up and judge their technical ability before you could get to know their personality. But if you do get to know their personality a little bit, and if they have flaws or they're perhaps one of the weaker ones of the group, I think as long as you can challenge them and you can improve them as individuals, then that's good enough for us to take them on a course.
And then banded about a lot at the moment is like coaches' philosophies or style of play. Do you have a consistent way you like to play?
In terms of formation,
in terms of...
No, I don't, and I probably change because sometimes I read things, sometimes I sort of assess my own work and analyse what we do. I've always probably been a coach that likes people to pass the ball, but that sometimes takes away from the individuals that can run with the ball. I don't stop that, I don't discourage it, but I've probably sometimes gone over, or it's taken over that I want the passing way, or to play a passing way of playing, really. So, but I have adjusted that, and throughout the season, I will change. My philosophy really is to allow players to make their own decisions, but offer them solutions to the scenarios of when they play against different formations, and also ask them to make decisions on and to be able to play different ways, whether we're going to press high, press a little bit later, are we going to play out from the back, are we going to play from the middle third, are we going to counter-attack. So the sort of coaching philosophy really is to sort of give them all as much information as I can on different ways of playing, and with and without the ball.
In my experience, that's probably quite a rare way of doing it, because I've seen like now a lot of people just go, we counter-attack, so we're going to drop deep and constantly counter, or we're going to play out from the back and constantly do that. Is there a reason why you decided you're going to try and make it almost like a complete education for them in the football?
Because I want them to be able to make their own decisions, because I think if they're with me for 2 years and beyond that, they might go to the Southern League, they might go into the Conference South, they might go into the Western League. So wherever they go, I think if you ask them to play one way, they might know that way, but if they go to a club that doesn't play that way, then they can become a little bit confused by it. And it's the same as like asking people to pass and keep possession and be technically good with the football. Sometimes you go into the Western League and they don't want that. They're not going to play out from the back, they're not going to play in midfield very much. But I think if they can learn how to play by passing and movement and possession, they can learn other ways around that. But if you ask them to play a Western League way of playing, for example, where you go back to front quite quickly, and then someone asks them to play, I don't think they can go back to make that work.
So obviously, more recently we're getting quite a lot of teams that play like 4-3-3, or more recently 3 at the back, etc. For you, if you had 2 very good number 9s in your team, would you go, actually, we need to cater around that, so I'll come up with a formation?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, and that's another thing why I can't have a consistent philosophy or consistent way of playing, because I don't know what my group's going to be like. I might not have. I might only have 2 centre backs. I might have 4 good centre backs, and in which time you might go with 3 at the back to fit them in. Like you say, 2 up front. would be quite rare, to be honest. But we did it last year. I had an under-16 player playing, and one of my first years was playing as well. So we went with a diamond, so 4-4-2, to fit that in. I rarely go a flat 4-4-2. That's something I probably played once or twice since I've been, in recent years anyway. But I would normally go something a little bit more intricate than that.
And do you find when you get players at 16, a lot of them have just played that same formation coming through? They've only had exposure to one style.
Pretty much, yeah. And if I'm honest, quite often for 6 months you're working against sort of bad habits. You're trying to change their habits a little bit in terms of how they train, the tempo of how they train, receiving skills, passing skills, that kind of thing. And I think they have an idea of how the game's played, but when you ask them to play at a different level and develop into under 18 then senior football, I think it's quite a shock for some of them.
So if it was day one of pre-season, obviously we'll exclude like the running element, which I know there always will be. What will you look to work on with your boys? What basic principles will you look to?
Most of our work is done with the balls, to be fair, because then you can improve the technical element of the passing and receiving skills. But you do it with a running element in it, sort of disguised running, if you like. So, disguise is always that good. So just to improve the passing quality as much as anything in those kind of drills, passing, receiving quality. Because I think so quite often now, lads will pass the ball 10 yards, and if it's bouncing, spinning, I think they think it's okay as long as it gets there. But when you look at the top level, it surprises me a little bit they don't recognise the quality of the football when pass on the football, when they watch your Man Cities and Liverpool and people like that, when the ball hardly ever leaves the ground. They don't seem to recognise that, so they need to be reminded of that and just improve their technical abilities really to be able to do that.
And is there a disparity in terms of what you get when you come to university program? Do you feel like, obviously they've been through 2 years of a program similar to yours, are they, obviously I hope that they have more knowledge, but do you think it's around other systems, or are they pigeonholed into one system, or how does that work?
There's obviously a variation, because again it's a little bit like me taking sort of 16-year-olds, that we're taking 18-year-olds here. They've all been asked to do different things, learn different things, and we're asking them to learn probably things on top of that, added to what they already know. So it's surprising. It's surprising because I like to think people leave my programme with a basic knowledge of how to pass a football, how to receive a football, movement, how to keep the ball, and that kind of stuff. But sometimes 18-year-olds, even some that have been at professional clubs, you kind of question what they've learnt sometimes. But I'm not saying that they haven't been taught it, but perhaps they haven't learnt it as well as they should.
Standard and tempo and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's clear why they haven't been successful in their professional careers, but it's another opportunity for them to step in and start playing senior football at the level that's right for them.
And in terms of development at these age groups, do you think you can make a big difference to someone's technical ability? Not
loads, but if there's something glaringly obvious, I think we can change that or help to change that. I think as players get older, their habits are more secured, and so to change those habits becomes harder. What I'd like to see, like from all of it really, is the skills and the standards that I ask my 16, 18-year-olds to be able to implement. I'd like them to learn that before they come to me, really, so they have that, and then we can sort of move on to things more advanced, if you like. And that's the same with the group here, the university group. Sometimes you're thinking, I think you should already know that, and then we can move forward a little bit. But if you need to go backwards a little bit, you go backwards, and you keep reminding them of their individual skills and standards, and try to make them better.
And obviously you play against lots of different teams in the kind of southwest region, sometimes branching out. Do you think that's a common thread when you go around?
I think it is, yeah. And I think from speaking to coaches, I've been coaching now for about 20 years, so over that time you kind of get to see a change in mindset as much as anything. And you speak to other coaches and they'll all agree. I went to a place, it was about 2 years ago, and the coach was fuming because people let him down at the last minute, and he said every year it gets worse every year. He says if I do it next year it won't be like this. I said, well, next year it probably will, because it just gradually seems to be that players, certainly in terms of commitment, lose their commitment. That commitment seems to be something that's dissolving away from the sort of levels that we would like, put it that way.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. Possibly because the better players in local areas get treated like treated like they're better than what they are, and they get a false impression of themselves. So I think it's quite easy now for lads to just let people down. So if they don't want to play, the last minute they just phone up and say, I'm ill, or I'm not saying people obviously do get ill, and sometimes it's a genuine reason, but sometimes it's just a bit like, I don't fancy it today, I'm going to leave it. And I think that's something that's increasing. That's becoming more and more of a problem.
Is there anything else you've seen over your 20-year period that either for better or for worse?
I think sort of the influx of social media can give players a kind of sometimes a slightly false sense of their own perspective, and their expectations, and this is sometimes from the parents. Their expectations sometimes don't actually match their ability, and I don't know where that comes from, if I'm honest. Possibly because they put things on social media and it all looks good, and they overhype their own value in some ways. It sounds a little bit negative, that, but it's kind of used as a way. Like, I think sometimes, for players to actually achieve something, I think they feel like they've got some sense of achievement by putting things on social media, that they've done this and done that. So because of that, I think they don't work quite so hard to really genuinely achieve things. Lads have left me that I always think lads who leave my academy should be playing Western League level at least. Some of them go away and struggle, but you can kind of see it throughout the 2 years that they're with me, because you're trying to give them the picture of when you go out into the big wide world, it's tough, and they don't really get it. They think it's easier than what it is, and when it does arrive, they find that quite tough. And this is because of their own sort of expectations, which sometimes come from parents, peer groups, friends. Not really sure, but they get this false sense of their worth, and you want them to achieve, but sometimes they've got to work a little bit harder than what they do to achieve.
So you think obviously I guess they get the likes and stuff on Facebook or anything like that without actually realising, or obviously they'll see Ronaldo get likes or streamers and stuff like that, exactly, without realising the sacrifices and stuff that he makes in order to get to that.
I think that's the thing. I mean, Ronaldo's a classic example, because sort of going back a while when people were talking about Wayne Rooney and Ronaldo in the same breath, that and they were both world-class players at the same time, and people were saying Rooney will be take over as the best player in the world. Possibly from Ronaldo, or was it Lionel Messi? I don't know. You'll view on that. But with that in mind, you just think, Ronaldo works relentlessly, all the time on his physique, his fitness, and Rooney didn't. And I know that sounds a little bit damning for such a good player, but if he'd worked a little bit harder, would he have reached the levels that Ronaldo did?
Yeah.
So
I guess that's probably the bit that people nowadays don't see. They don't see the Ronaldo eating the same boring meals week in, week out when he goes home, or to the extras that he does.
Well, if you want to judge by physicality alone, I mean, look at the two physicalities, and Ronaldo has become a superior athlete in every way. In terms of football ability, was there much between the two of them? Probably not. So maybe it is that physicality that separated Ronaldo from being seen as the best player in the world by many. To Wayne Rooney, probably, I know he's still playing now, but he probably went away from the top level too soon, in my view. But maybe that was an easy way out. Maybe he'd had enough. I don't know.
And have you seen a big transformation in the game itself over those 20 years, from when you started out as a coach to where we are now?
Certainly, and from when I played, I mean, I sort of grew up at Bournemouth, spent most of my time at Bristol Rovers. I can't remember playing three at the back. Certainly didn't do it at Bournemouth. I don't think we did it at Bristol Rovers. May have done it occasionally. Did it when I went to Exeter. Played three at the back. But the possession-based element of the game has increased, massively in all that time. And sort of Bristol Rovers were always sort of seen as a fairly direct side anyway, and I guess we were. We got back to front as quickly as you possibly could, and did what you did in the opposition's half. And everything you defended most of what you defended was in the air. So that has changed massively now. So in a possession element of the game. The technicalities of how you press rather than just pressing the ball and just putting pressure on the ball is different now. You set traps, you have a strategy as a team to how you get the ball back, rather than perhaps it used to be mainly the front two that would press the back four, force them into an error so you could win it back somewhere else. It's very simple then, but it's a lot more complicated now. There's a lot more ways of pressing, formations, and how you press in formations, and how you press against so much different formations, which is why it's hard as a coach now. It's more interesting to coach because there's more to coach. It's more of a challenge for coaches because you can set up to press or to keep the ball, expecting to play against a certain formation. But if you come up against a formation you're not expecting, then people need to make those decisions. Which is why I like to sort of switch around with my formations and our strategies of how we play. Because then hopefully the players will learn, we're playing against a back three today and not back four, so this is what we need to do to be able to adjust before you talk about it at half time.
And how have you found giving players that ownership in terms of, like you said, they're being able to make decisions in game?
Frustrating sometimes, but I think they need to do it, because I think as coaches we probably take too much responsibility for that on ourselves. It is our responsibility to educate the players, but you sometimes think, well, you should know that, you're expecting that a little bit, but then if they don't get it, you need to review it, revise it, and go again. But you kind of put in responsibility on the players, and I think we should do that. Give more responsibility to the players.
And in terms of ways of doing that, how have you got any particular methods you use to try and?
Depends what formation we're playing. Certainly if it's a front two or it's a player on his own, a lone centre forward. I like to force the ball inside, so I like to cut the fullbacks off if we possibly can, force it inside and look to trap it. We've been fairly successful in that this year. In fact, when we started this year, we got a very young group. We're actually probably better without the ball than with it at times. We're quite threatening in that way and scored a lot of goals from that way because it's just something the group probably understood quicker. I think we started, myself and James Moon, who helps me with Bath College, we probably started that way of how we're going to play this year. And I always like to have a strong mindset of how to press, because I think if you can press and you press consistently, if you can press in training, then that's the one thing that lifts the tempo of training, for one thing, and it takes it to a more realistic tempo training, so it takes it closer to the game level basically.
And what about for individuals? So say for example you've got a senior centre midfielder and you want him to start recognising they've got a one-man press, so this means X, Y, Z for me. How have you got any methods in terms of getting them to take ownership of those?
Yeah, absolutely. My captain at the moment is a lad called Luke Sevier, and he takes responsibility for that. He's probably our most vocal player as well. So we even things I'm quite big on how we get the ball back on restarts. So any throw-ins and stuff like that, I expect him to set the pitch up so that the first ball in, we can at least get some sort of threat on the ball, and then perhaps win the next pass or win the first pass. But if it's not set to start off with, you can't do it. And quite often, what you'll find is we'll work on it the day before a game or a couple of days before a game, and it'll work. But then the following week we kind of forget that, and that's the frustrating thing, because we haven't spoken about it. We forget to do it. But in time they'll learn the value of it and replicate it and repeat it wherever they go. And
do you always go for your captains and stuff? Are they generally the more vocal ones? Or?
Yeah, it's probably a few things really. The ones that train consistently, the ones that you expect to be at every training session, the ones that apply themselves in the right way. I wouldn't say it's always the best player, for example, but Luke is used every training session, works really hard, has come on leaps and bounds since he started with us. And just a good example for everyone else really, because he has developed, because he's always at training, always listening, and always applies himself in the right way.
And one of the things you spoke about previously was about how the game's changed in terms of maybe being less direct, and now people want to play more.
Yeah.
Have you seen a skill shift for players in terms of, for example, as a defender, their ability to play out, to be able to deal with crosses? Have you seen a shift in?
Yeah, I think you don't see many forwards or defenders who can head a ball, for one thing, as much as you used to. I think the stock sort of pass now is probably a 10, 15, 20 yard pass, and most players can do that. Don't see it very often where someone hits 40, 50 yard passes, or not as much. There's certainly, because certainly the young groups coming in, the young players coming in, maybe it's because they train on small areas, maybe it's because they've been asked to play that way, I don't know, but they don't very often have the ability to get their head up and hit long ranging passes. So that's something that's changed, and it's something I want to improve on, really, because I think we can, every now and then you want to be an innovator and come up with something completely different. And I remember saying it to Dennis Mortimer as I was at a CPD event, and had a discussion with him, small talk if you like, but it developed into if we could play. This is when Stoke had Peter Crouch and Andy Carroll when it was in his prime. I said, as a country, England, could we win the World Cup, or would we play like Stoke to win the World Cup? And he kind of left it as, that's a good question, isn't it? What's the answer? There's no answer to it, is there? Would we do it?
Don't think we would.
No, I don't think we would, but why wouldn't we?
Yeah.
Do you think we could win the World Cup that way more than the ways we're playing at the moment? Although this is a different time now, because we are closer to being able to play the same type of football as Hollands and Germanys and people like that now. We're closer to that, but at the time we were kind of quite a long way off ever thinking about winning a World Cup. But then if possession football came in and everyone took a little while to get used to it, and then all of a sudden everyone was doing it, but now everyone's doing it. So it changed the game from direct, loose, no possession football to possession football. So if you swung it back the other way now, and you had a Rory Delap throwing the ball in the box to a big centre forward, would your Argentinas and people like that be able to cope with that? Brazil, Germany, Holland, because no one else does it.
No.
So that's what my argument was. Did come up with something brand new.
Zig when everyone else zags.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So everyone would hate it, and I think the British public would probably be a little bit embarrassed by it. But then if you started getting closer to World Cups and winning World Cups that way, then it's a bit like a Wimbledon way, isn't it? The old-fashioned Wimbledon. They didn't worry about what people thought about them, but as an innovative way of playing. Cambridge did it as well, and became really successful from it. So maybe.
It's interesting. I know as part of like EPP's academy stuff, teams can have their own way of playing if it kind of has a pathway and stuff. Yeah. But I don't know how many of them in their EPP would be that in terms.
Well, I don't think they would. And it's like going back to my previous point that if you ask your young players to play that way to win tournaments at under 13s, under 14s, you're not teaching them the game. You're teaching them probably one specific way to play, and I don't think then they would learn enough about how to keep the ball, how to press. Possession, the technicalities of the game, because they'd only learn that one way. They'd only know that one way. So I don't think we do, and I'm not advocating it at all. I was just thinking it's a question that if we thought we could win the World Cup that way, because like England as a country has always been fairly physical, hard working. That's how we see ourselves, and don't know if that's true now actually, but that probably brought us a lot of success. Back in sort of the 80s when you had Brian Robson and people like that, Terry Butcher, people like that were physical, strong, demanding, not technically as good as probably your Brazil players and your Argentina players and people like that. But we probably we certainly considered ourselves to have more heart than the opposition, and probably used that as a way of overcoming the opposition sometimes. So if that's an English trait, why not use it?
I think Greece and Leicester, obviously, two examples of people winning when no one expected them to. But Leicester were very much, everyone else was trying to play. Teams like, I remember Swansea that year were decent on the ball. Everyone was trying to play. And Leicester were the only team that went, actually, we got no real interest in maintaining the ball. No, we're going to break on you quick. And I remember speaking to friends and they were like, I think Leicester will fall away? And I was like, it won't. I said, because everyone's been so arrogant, thinking, oh, it's only Leicester will be able to play round them. And what was interesting was the following year where people went, oh, actually it's Leicester, and sat back in. The drop off was quite
alarming. Yeah.
So the difference of that being able to zig when people zag is a real.
Yeah. You got to be brave to do it. And like I say, when Andy Carroll was kind of unplayable on his day, wasn't he? And Peter Crouch was, and if you were, say, putting things in the opposition's box from distance and taking no risks in midfield, your midfield players can get higher up the pitch and get closer to your centre forwards. And Stephen Gerrard scored a lot of goals off of what Peter Crouch did. And quite often it was a ball into Peter Crouch who would head it down, and Gerrard scored a lot of goals that way, from scoring from distance by supporting the centre forward. So, but yeah, it's not easy on the eye, and I don't think even the British public would have that now unless they actually start to think, but if you're going to develop something, it's like France developed their way of playing, Germany did it. It's like an 8-10 year process, isn't it? So it's a long process.
So for you, kind of going right back to start, when you Nipper, what was the reason you very first got into football? How did that come around?
I don't know. I just enjoyed it, I think. I enjoyed, if you compare what youngsters have now, as a kid, if I had a football kit and a football for Christmas, I was happy, and that would last me until I lost my ball, or I grew out of the kit, pretty much. And you wanted to put the kit on, you wanted to go out in the back garden and kick the ball against the fence, and that's kind of what you did. And if you were school holidays or whatever, you get a group of mates and you go down the park and you do the same thing, play in not very nice places sometimes. And but it's just like you had a football, and it was what is a football? What's the value of a football? It's an object, isn't it, that bounces evenly, and it challenges you in some way. So why do kids spend all that time, like I did, in the back garden and sometimes out in the street just juggling a football? It's madness, really, isn't it?
Yeah. And would you do like ball mastery as it's known nowadays? Or?
Not to the extent it's done now, not like the Kerber kind of stuff, like juggling a ball. I remember, I think it was the Argentina World Cup in 1978. There were people freestyling, and that was probably the first time I'd seen it, and it was quite well publicised. So try doing that sort of stuff, sitting down and juggling a ball, and in fact then it was like very basic to what the freestylers do now. But you just replicate that. But when you see it, you try to do it, don't you? And you watch football on television when I was a kid, and you try and do that, and you try to score the goals, and you try to head a ball like they did and stuff like that. So it's just I don't know, it's just in you or not, possibly, isn't it? I guess as a kid, you grow up and think, well, I want to do that.
And did you play any other sports growing up, or was it mainly?
Not really. No, I did a little bit of tennis. Played cricket for the county, but we weren't very good. Dorset weren't very good at cricket. I might be just one of the few that turned up. That was about it, really. I didn't really play rugby, didn't get involved in rugby too much. So that was it, really. But football was, there was never a decision to make, football or something else. There's only ever one decision, really.
And so you mentioned earlier that obviously your YT years, as I know now, you ended up at Bournemouth. What was the process for you in terms of being a kid and watching TV and going replicating the garden to get into Bournemouth?
I went for trials. I think I went to Southampton. I was rejected there. I went to Portsmouth, still waiting for an answer from them. I'm still waiting for a trial for Swindon as well. They never got back to me. So I went to Bournemouth, and they took me on quite quickly. I think I was 15. So I did a year there. Again, completely different to how it is now. Just a group of kids in random kit, and just trying to do your best. Playing on outside Bournemouth ground, there used to be like a red grass pitch. You used to run around in trainers, didn't have boots. Wreck your trainers, wreck your kit, wreck your knees. But that's the way things were then. And I did enough to be offered a YTS. It was the first. I was probably fortunate because it was the first time that Bournemouth had done a YTS scheme. They did have apprentices, but they only had one or two. But when the YTS had just been introduced, I think it had been introduced perhaps a year or two before, but it's the first year that Bournemouth did it. They took 9 players, I think. Might have been 12, something like that. Nine players, I think. We're just young kids, just trying to strive to become better, really. If there was any less, I probably wouldn't have been in the top 5 anyway. So if it had been less, I probably wouldn't have done that. And I'm probably why I sort of look at, sometimes with a little bit of disappointment, I look at young lads and think, why don't you try harder? Why don't you work harder? Because I was one of those that wasn't particularly gifted or talented, but I worked hard and I strived to be as good as I could be. And I got a second year as a YTS, got a first year as a pro and a second year as a pro. I was injured for a year, but still worked hard, keep myself going and keep myself fit. I think it was my 4th season as a pro. I came to Bristol Rovers, so a lot of it, a lot of me was down to effort, really, if I'm honest. So.
And then in terms of like coaches and stuff at that age group, did you have your own YTS coach? Was it the first team gaffer at the time?
I think most of the first year we didn't. First pre-season we did with the first team squad, which was quite daunting, quite scary. We weren't good enough to compete with them. Couldn't run with them at the levels they were running at. The second year we started with a coach who didn't last that long, became the first team coach, a fellow called Stuart Morgan, and then a fellow called Keith Williams took over, who was probably someone who probably had more effect on my career than anyone else. Quite a different way of working. He'd started as a coach at Aston Villa, played for Northampton, had knee problems, so he retired early. And I think through his frustration of not being able to sort of fulfil his own career in that way, I think he worked really, really hard with players to give them the opportunity that he didn't have. So his work ethic was phenomenal, and that's probably, I think I had a fairly good work ethic anyway. But with Keith, it was phenomenal. The running he did, the amount of one year I remember being injured, and we were doing over 1,000 sit-ups every day, and that was like not just your normal sit-ups. That was like intense stuff for medicines balls and all sorts of stuff. And but that was old school. That's it. You wouldn't do that now because you probably end up with an imbalance that caused you a back injury, and I think it did, because that was why I missed a year of football, probably the year after, because my pelvis had gone out of line and I had back problems because of it. But that's the kind of knowledge we had in those days compared to what we have now. Back then you'd probably do squats against a wall, some sit-ups and some press-ups, and that's what you did. Nowadays obviously there's so much more to it and so much knowledge that goes into it. But it's the work ethic as much as anything. He was also very aggressive, and he instilled aggression into us as a squad. We did quite well in the FA Youth Cup that year because of Keith's work, really organised us. We were aggressive back in the days when you could tackle with both feet. We did a lot of that, and we were quite successful from it, really. The thing was, it kind of showed us what you could achieve with hard work, as much as anything. And however good you are, if you work a bit harder, you'll be a little bit better.
And how did he instill that aggression and that work rate? Because obviously we're saying now there's probably a disparity between kids, and I've played with people since what you said there, where I think if I had your talent, I'd be a lot higher than you are because of work ethic. How did he instill that into you?
Training was hard. Like every day we'd run. Most days we'd do sit-ups or press-ups, or we'd do some sort of body exercise. We did a lot of keep ball, non-directional, with sort of, I wouldn't say with no purpose, but it would go on for quite a long time, and it was really competitive. Tackles were meant. If you had the ball, you treated it quite preciously. If you didn't have the ball, you worked really, really hard to get it back, and he kind of drove you into doing that. And there was forfeits for losing and all that kind of stuff that just made you just relentless in your work, really. And I think the thing with that is it becomes a time where you don't have to be driven so hard now, because you feel the rewards of winning the ball back and getting the encouragement and the praise for getting the ball back, or keeping the ball for 8 passes to score, or whatever it was, and you felt the rewards, and like you could suddenly think, well, this working hard is it's rewarding. So you didn't need to be driven at that point. You knew it was happening by the habit you'd then sort of taken on board, really. And and I think Harry Redknapp was a manager at the time. I don't think he agreed with a lot of Keith's methods, or some of his methods, because some of the tackling was a little bit interesting, put it that way. I mean, we used to do sessions where a defender would oppose a forward, the forward would run at a defender, and 2-footed tackles and scissor tackles and that. He was teaching us that. But back in the day, you could do that. You could do that. I mean, there were, if you missed and you hurt someone, and you'd be in trouble with a referee on a match day. But generally speaking, we were quite good at it. So you could get both feet behind the ball and win the ball. It wasn't a problem. Obviously, that's changed now.
Yeah, you couldn't get away with that now, I guess.
No.
And then how, in terms of things with Harry Redknapp and stuff, and manager at the time, did you have any dealings with him being a YTS? Yeah. Did you ever go in and train? Obviously, I know you said in the first year you did, moving into your second and
first. Probably more in the second year, but we did do some in the first year because we didn't really have a youth coach. So probably most evident when we on a Friday, because it's obviously a match preparation day, or match preparation then was just like a five-a-side. And it used to be the south versus the north.
Okay.
So sometimes it'd be a couple of the YTS boys, sometimes it'd be more. And myself and a friend of mine I grew up with, David Coleman, were quite often involved in that. It's quite intimidating, quite a scary thing, because they played to win, and Harry would be involved in it. Stuart Morgan, his assistant, would be involved in it, and if Harry lost, he would be absolutely quite a scary person to be around, because he didn't like losing too well. And you give the ball away, or you miskick things, or you don't defend. The senior players got to let you know about it. So I don't think that happens now. I'm not saying it should happen, but for me, growing up in that, made you realise how tough the game actually is. And I think this is where, some ways, youngsters that leave me, I try to tell them that when you go and play in the Western League or the Southern League, if you're not pulling your weight, people will let you know, because you're playing with people who've been at work all day, and they go there to win games and be successful. So if you're not pulling your own weight, then they let you know, and managers probably leave you out. So it is a bit of a sink or swim situation, really. But I don't think youngsters now grow up with enough hardness in them, enough toughness to be able to cope with that. So I think they look at it and think, that's Western League's crap, and then they look at something else, another level, go to Southern League level where there's more football played, but there's probably about the same amount of football played, but it's more physical and quicker, so it's even harder. So it is hard, but getting that mindset is also very difficult for them. I don't think they get that education now.
I think that's a society thing, probably, isn't it?
I think so.
Cotton wool.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. And there is actually quite a lot of youngsters play in the Western League now, but I think that's because the Western League is probably not as strong as it was. I played in the Western League when I was at Bournemouth. I went on loan to Swanage, and it was hard then. I think it's a little bit easier now, and there's a lot more youngsters in it, because I think probably older players don't like playing in it anymore as much as they used to. So there are youngsters playing in it, but it's still pretty competitive.
Obviously, I think you played 4 times for the first team, was you at Bournemouth?
At Bournemouth, yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So, in terms of your first appearance going in to that environment, how did that come about?
It was right at the end of my second year. I think I was still 17. It was just before my 18th birthday, and I went to New Zealand, I think the day after my debut. It was against Newport. And my second year, I went from being quite average to being quite good. I started my YTS career as a midfield player. I couldn't run, had no pace, and Harry Redknapp once said it to me: you do really well sometimes, you beat players with like clever movement or whatever, by the time you get to the ball to cross it, it looks like your legs are gone. And that was me. I was quite weak and quite small as a kid. Now I'm just weak. So then, for whatever reason, halfway through a reserve game, and I'd headed a few balls as a midfield player on the halfway line, and Harry said to me, go and play centre back in the second half, and I never looked back from them, really. Everything was in front of me, so I didn't have to worry about beating people or being clever. It was just head it, pass it, really. And I could do both of those things, and then I learned the position a little bit more as I went on, without too much coaching, really. And that's another thing. I think now we coach. Perhaps sometimes we give too much information. The information that I learnt from was probably self-taught, really. Working out what worked and what didn't. And like I said before, like that, I had no pace. I wasn't quick, but I could read the game, and I got myself into positions where I could defend. And I learned how to cope with pace against me. But that wasn't something that someone said, this is what you need to do, that and do this. You just kind of learn it. And that's through having a desire to succeed, really, because I didn't want to be someone who kept getting run past, couldn't defend, got beaten in the air. So I learned to be better at what I did, basically. And again, something that probably doesn't happen quite so much these days. I used to head a ball, head footballs after training, I don't know, 50, 100 times a day sometimes, just out on my own with someone who kicking balls at me. So yeah, I became a centre half, and that was it really. I never looked back.
And then your first game
was against Newport.
Okay.
Yeah, Newport County, when that was what is now League One. It's the end of season, so it's a sort of dead rubber, really, if you like. I mean, no one was going to go up, no one was going to go down. Played against a fellow called Steve Cooper that probably not many people would know, but he was a gymnast, or had a gymnastic background, could jump. So my strength was winning the ball in the air, and I don't think I won any that day. I might have won one or two. It was a tough debut anyway, put it that way.
And then so obviously you've gone away and you come back the next year, I assume hoping to be involved.
Yeah, but it didn't work out that way. I went to New Zealand, hurt my groin, came back first day at Bournemouth, and we'd missed the pre-season, me and David Coleman, my friend that I spoke about. We went away to New Zealand for 3.5 months, missed pre-season with Bournemouth. Got a dead leg the first day, lasted 3 weeks, came back too early, pulled my thigh, lasted another 3 weeks, and that's when I started doing all the sit-ups and what have you. So I struggled for fitness for the rest of that season. Started the following season with a back injury, and then I missed the whole of that season. So I missed one of a season and a half almost of what where I should have been really kicking on. And then my final season at Bournemouth, I played twice, I think. So yeah, and then I moved to Bristol Rovers in October.
So obviously during that period, you had the FA Cup game against Man United.
Yeah,
right in thinking.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you have done your research.
What year were you then?
I was a second year. What was I? First year or second year? I might have been a first year YTS, but I wasn't involved in that. But obviously at the game, and special.
And how was that huge in terms of, I imagine, atmosphere and stuff?
Oh, incredible! Absolutely incredible. And Dean Court, as it was then, same location as the Vitality Stadium as it is now, and they're absolutely rammed. There's an atmosphere outside that, Man United come to town is huge and quite intimidating, quite scary. I think football was probably more intimidating back in those days. But the ground was absolutely rammed to the rafters, and we won, and it's just amazing, incredible feeling, really. To think that that Bournemouth beat Man United on that day. So massive thing, and that is a thing that incentivises you, really. You see that and you think, I want to be part of that, and now that's a good thing about being in a club that's got things to offer, really. That's my same thing. I mean, you need to see that to be to have that motivation to work harder yourself, because all of those players that you see, and we were quite a close bunch, really, that the senior players would talk to you and you'd see them working, you'd see them sort of staying out on their own and training. That's one thing that probably motivated me to do what I was doing. And a lot of sort of fairly average players that most of them have been at Chris Sully had been at Chelsea. We had a lot of ex-West Ham players. They'd failed somewhere, but then came down to try and reassert themselves, really. And it's a bit like the Bristol Rovers scenario. I mean, I kind of failed at Bournemouth, really. I wasn't good enough to play for Bournemouth long term, so that's what Bristol Rovers signed back in those days. A lot of players that Andy Rees had failed at Wolves as a kid, got signed from Willenhall, I think. Devon White, Carl Saunders, Jeff Twentyman, people like that. Vaughan Jones had been at other clubs and probably not quite been good enough, and pushed together. And Jerry Francis, the manager, probably used that as a way of gluing us together and buying into a method that would give us some success. And there's a shortcut really for that was fitness, hard work, playing direct, and getting your rewards that way. So there's more than one way to gain success.
So I guess I've got two questions off the back of that. First one is, how do you get an environment where people stay out and do those extra bits? And obviously you mentioned that quite a few senior pros that would stay out and do extras. And then the next question is, obviously leading up to that FA Cup tie, you would have known the players in the Man United side at that time,
Yeah.
possibly even watched them on TV a few years earlier. Did you or people in that squad find that intimidating when you're walking out and you've got those people next to you, or is it kind of like, actually, no,
Well, I wasn't obviously walking out, but I've seen them. But yeah, I mean, you see them like in a tunnel area and in the change room area, and that. Probably the first thing you recognise, they're huge. You know, it's one of the differences that, and even in sort of later in my career, I remember Bristol Rovers playing West Ham. Alvin Martin's probably 3 or 4 stone heavier than me, and probably 6 inches taller than me, and that's what a top centre half looks like now. So that's another reason why I didn't get any higher. I wasn't quick enough, and probably wasn't quite big enough. But in terms of motivating players to stay out and do extra, I think that's probably down to the manager's selection of people he chooses to sign. And he signed those players, and that attitude sort of was passed around the younger players. So it instilled a work ethic that that we learnt from, really. So again, that's probably something that's a little bit of a back way of me understanding or learning to work hard, and the rewards you could get from working hard by seeing other people doing it and seeing those rewards. And you don't get many rewards in football, really. Obviously, in professional football, you get paid. Back in the day, they wouldn't have earned very much money at Bournemouth. But your rewards are those days at Man United. Like if you ask any of those players now, and Paul Compton will tell you, because he played in a Littlewoods Cup game and scored against Man United. He's probably told you that.
He hasn't actually. No,
not really.
No.
Okay.
I'll bring that up.
Yeah, okay, bring that one up. But yeah, those little moments that you take with you for the rest of your life. You don't get them very often, and I think now as well. Perhaps some people think, well, I want to be a footballer, I want to win a league, I want to win cups and that. But as a pro or even at senior level, you win a league, I don't know, 2 or 3 times in your career if you have a 16-year career. When I was at Bournemouth the following year, they won the league. That was the year I was injured, so I didn't take any part in that, but I watched it, and I left in the October of the following year. Bristol Rovers won the league in 1991, I think, 1991. I was injured all that year, so I didn't really take part in that. I won a league playing non-league with Clevedon. So in a sort of, I played till I was 40. That was it. That's in terms of the success or reward that I had. They're few and far between. And if you think you're going to win a league every year, you're going to be very disappointed. And this is the thing about understanding how hard it is to achieve anything in football, really. That if you understand that, then you've got to apply yourself to earn those rewards. And sometimes you don't always get what you deserve. I mean, you have to work hard to get what you deserve, but you don't always get it even then. And I don't think everyone gets that. But maybe it's a personality thing, maybe it's a work ethic. I mean, my dad was a cyclist and worked ridiculously hard at what he did. As an individual sport. So perhaps I got some of that from him. But that was. I'm never going to say I was a great player, but I worked hard, and I think I achieved probably all that I could because I worked as hard as I could. I wish I knew then what I know now, but I didn't. So I
suppose at least that's a positive. You look back on your career and you know that actually. I know there'd be plenty of people that would be sitting around your age going, "If I'd done this, if I'd done that," or having regrets. Whereas actually, if you go, "No, I did."
Yeah, I have got a few regrets. I mean, probably one of them is that I didn't look after my injuries as well as I should have done. If I could just about run, that was good enough. I'd play, because I hated missing out. I hated not playing, really. So, but make the most of it. It's a short career, so you've got to make the most of it, really.
And then, obviously, you mentioned that you left Bournemouth, went to Bristol Rovers. Why Bristol Rovers?
They wanted me. Yeah, I think I played a reserve game for Bournemouth at Wimbledon. Bobby Gould was the manager at Wimbledon. He watched the game and phoned up Terry Francis and said, "Look, centre half did really well. Have a look at him." So I went on loan to Bristol Rovers for a month. Then it was a second month, then a third month. Then you have to sign them or not. And I signed 2.5 year contract, I think. And I stayed for 10 years after that. So.
And then how did you find that period? Obviously you were playing first team regularly.
If I'm honest, when I first came, I was so fit because I'd been injured for a year, like I said, and then over that summer, my youth coach, who was no longer the youth coach, Keith Williams, we went running nearly every day, ridiculous running. So I was so fit that when I went to Bristol Rovers, I just found the game easy. and this is another thing I try to instill in people, like, if you're fit enough to cope with 90 minutes, then you've got a chance. If you're not, then then you're going to struggle a little bit. But I was that fit. I remember almost finding work for myself to do on a football pitch. So I liked heading the ball. So if the ball was coming down one side of the pitch, I'd speak to the other centre half and I'll let it come out, because I wanted to do it. If it went the other side, I'd go, it's daft really. But I wanted to get involved in things because I was fit enough, and I just loved it really. Just loved playing. So yeah, it's just through fitness really. That found the game quite easy. Then I got injured. So and that stumped it all a little bit. But it was good. I mean, like I say, the fitness element of it is just massive really. Something else I try to instill in people.
And then during that time, obviously you mentioned that Bristol Rovers kind of went up and injured throughout the season. Did you see a disparity between the league you've been playing in and the one above when you did come back into the side?
Yeah, it took me a while to get back in the side. I think I'd actually I'd gone on loan to Bath. I was fit. The start of their championship season. What's the championship now? And I played 3 games for Bath, I think, and then Steve Yates, who was playing alongside Jeff Twentyman, got injured. So I got recalled and I played. I think I scored the first game I came back, and I played probably about 20 games between that point and the end of the season. Then I got another contract and sort of kicked on again a little bit really. But yeah, it was a huge difference. I mean, in the championship then, I think Leicester were in it, Newcastle were in it, Ipswich were in it. So yeah, it was quite a tough league. Some proper traditional football clubs, good football clubs playing in that league.
In terms of you, what things did you find difficult? Was it technical, tactical, physical?
The speed of things really. Yeah, the speed the ball moved at. Played against Swindon once when Glenn Hoddle was the manager, and I think this was in the championship. And you just couldn't guess what he was going to do. I remember a fellow called David Mitchell and played alongside Steve White. Steve White was a bit of a Rovers legend, so people might know that name, but probably not so much Paul Mitchell or Dave Mitchell actually. They kicked off and Glenn Hoddle had the ball under his feet, and from nowhere with the outside of his left foot hit a ball probably 40 yards over my head that you just never saw coming. And like normally you can read things like that, and I probably had to rely on the ability to read things, but you just think wow. And Dave Mitchell knew it was coming. So straight away thinking, wow, it's going to be difficult. But yeah, that's what the top players do. Was fortunate enough to play against Liverpool in an FA Cup game at Twerton Park. We drew, and then we went to Anfield and got beat 2-1. But Jan Molby played in that, and he was the same. Just like the passes he would pick out, no way of reading what he was going to do. We just kept you on edge really, which in some ways improves you a little bit, or stimulates you a little bit. But confusion reigned because you just had no Ray Houghton, I think, played against Aston Villa as well in a cup game. Dwight York played, and players like that just on a different level really. It's easy to watch it on the television and think it's not that good, but the pace of what they do, the movement, the fact they rarely give the ball away cheaply, it's just really, really hard to deal with. But going back to Glenn Hoddle, just a phenomenal player. I think when he came out to warm up, I think our players clapped him as well. Just complete legend of the game really.
I guess that's being able to read those triggers is a big thing, particularly for defenders. And if he doesn't give you the ability to do that, then that's
worries you.
Yeah.
Keeps you worried.
Yeah. And then obviously when you're playing against these players and you think, I assume you're learning kind of as you're going along. What type of lessons did you learn as you're
probably learned that you couldn't win the ball as much as you wanted to. Paul Tisdale actually told me this. It's something about me that I didn't even know myself, and this is another thing that's quite interesting. I roomed with him. We played for Exeter together, and I roomed with Paul, and I don't know, we were just talking about the game, and he said, you get yourself in positions where you can win the ball. And I did do that. He was right, but I didn't know I did it. So I didn't know that was one thing that it's just something I wasn't aware of. It's just something I did naturally, probably. So it just when you go up a level, you can't get yourself in those positions to win the ball quite so much. So sometimes you just got to accept it. Like winning the ball's great, and like as a centre back, you win it and you retain possession. You regroup, regather yourself, and set yourself again. But against the top players, sometimes you just don't see the ball. You try to, but they don't allow you to get in those positions to win the ball back, because they'll go somewhere else. And then they try to draw you into positions that you don't really want to go in, because they leave the areas they want to go into. So then you have a real decision to make, and this is why pace is so key. You go into a position where you're not comfortable, and you get drawn into that position, and then you have to defend. The space is somewhere else, and they've left the space for themselves to run into. So if you don't get there first, you still don't see the ball, and then you're defending in your own box. So just cleverness, really. Ian Wright did it well. It's another name drop. Played against him on my testimonial, and took me to areas where I didn't really want to go, and he was so quick spinning in behind. It was just frightening, really. And he was past his best then, really. So the top players just got to respect what they do, really. You talked about Leicester earlier. Jamie Vardy, what he did for Leicester when they won the league in particular. That was top players marking him, but still couldn't cope. So it just makes you wonder how difficult that is. And physio at Bournemouth used to say there's no answer to pace, and there isn't, is there? If it's a straight foot race, then you've got to match that at some point. But I know he played against Bath one year for Fleetwood, I think it was Matt Coop said, just couldn't believe how quick he was. It's just ridiculous. But Premier League players think that as well now, don't they, often? Jamie Vardy.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So in terms of your time at Rovers, and obviously moving on to Exeter a little bit later on, was there a common thread to the top players you had in your teams at those times? So obviously speaking to Che, he mentioned that when he was at Bristol Rovers they had Nathan Anderson, Jason Roberts, Bobby Zamora, Jamie Curtin, and all really good strikers, all went on to have really good careers. He said there wasn't really that much of a common thread between the four of them in terms of what they offered or how they were, anything like that. For you, in terms of looking at some of those top players that you mentioned, is there a common thread that you could see with the ones that you played with, and obviously you're around every day because they're easier to...
Marcus Stewart was probably one of the better ones I played with, and Gary Penrice were probably the two, and they're both strikers. Common threads, they were just clever. I wouldn't say either of them were particularly... I'm not saying they were lazy, not at all, but they weren't... I wouldn't say they were both hard-working players, but they were just clever, just intelligent, really. So they make the game look a lot easier than what it is. Marcus Stewart, in fairness to him, through a bit of help from the coach at the time, Dennis Booth, worked on his touch every day. Dennis Booth was the first team coach, just used to smash balls at him from about 10-15 yards. And Marcus was just like day after day, just kill it, pop it back, kill it, pass it back. And Marcus was a good footballer anyway, but still had enough about him to think I can be better. And got to the pretty close to being in the England squad at one point. He was the Premier League's top scorer, wasn't he? About
Ipswich, right? Yeah,
that's right. Around about Christmas time, so it was way into the season. He was scoring goals for Ipswich. So people were talking about would he be the next one into the England squad? Didn't quite make it, unfortunately, but but just clever, really clever players.
And then when you're obviously with these senior players or becoming one yourself, how do you go about getting knowledge from them of things that they've experienced, or clubs or coaching? Because obviously you're not going to be able to work with every good coach up and down the country, but you'd probably be able to get access to them via players. Was there ever a way you'd be able to go and approach that player to try and get hints and tips?
Not really, no. I don't think there was. No, I don't remember doing it. That's probably something I missed out on.
Yeah.
But probably would have been worthwhile sort of spending some more time. But I think, like I said, there wasn't coaching as coaching is now. You kind of self-taught yourself. So like by training against, like Peter Beadle was also a good striker, very clever. And Marcus, you were always trying to think, well, he keeps taking me there, I don't want to go there, how do I deal with that? I keep getting into situations where I'm 1v1, I don't want to do that. So you kind of come up with your own solutions.
So do you as you got older, and obviously younger players are coming in to the setup, I imagine you're trying to organise them using kind of your experience and things that you've learned and stuff. how did you go about trying to explain to them why? Was it just like, you need to be here?
Yeah, difficult. Because as a senior player, you're still sort of set on what your own game as much as anything. But when you play with youngsters in reserves and what have you, you try to talk them through, if I'm here, you need to be there because of this. And it's something that Jerry Francis did a lot at Bristol Rovers, defending sessions where you'd have pressure and then pressure cover, one goes in, one drops out. Fairly basic stuff, but we did it over and over and over, and that's why we were sort of fairly organised in what we did. I think the year they went up, Bristol Rovers, I think they conceded something like about 22 goals, I think, in the whole season, which was phenomenal, really. But it was only through that organisation, really. So you try to just pass that on to the young players. Then I think I've probably always had it in me to be someone who helps other people, and you have a coaching mentality, I guess. Sort of trying to pass on your knowledge to other people. So I said,
imagine that must be hard as you're older, because you're wanting to kind of protect your platform in terms of being able to play.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there might be an opportunity where this centre half's playing alongside you, so you need him. But if he's 8 or 9 years younger than you, you're thinking, well, technically, I'm giving him information.
Yeah. I think some people probably might think I don't want to do that because of that very reason, but it'd be fairly unprofessional to do that. So I think I did.
Yeah. So in terms of, obviously you've left Rovers, gone down to Exeter and stuff, and you've gone to a few other clubs in the local region. How did you find stepping down and going to those clubs and stuff?
In fact, it was nice to start off with, because I think Exeter are in what is League 2 now and doing quite well. Bristol Rovers, when I left, were in what's League 1 now. And so you step down a level, it feels easy, or easier, should I say. And my final days at Rovers, or final sort of season at Rovers, I found it hard. Felt like the game was getting quicker. I was probably getting slower, but I felt like the game was getting quicker and I struggled to cope. Then I went down to Exeter, and it's the same thing really. Stepped down a level, but the game seemed slower, so I was able to cope easier. But I went down there with an injury a little bit as well. An arthritis in my big toe in my foot, and I could play for a while because I had an operation in the summer, but then I went down to Exeter and it just gradually got worse. So I think I finished that season, started the next season, and then the toe really started to play out, so I needed an operation, I think around about February of the following year. I had an operation on it which helped it a little bit. Then I stepped into part-time non-league at Forest Green, and again that was the same sort of thing, really stepped down a level. It seems sort of fairly easy to start off with because of the knowledge that you've got and where you've been in terms of how you understand the game, but eventually it catches up with you and it becomes a bit harder. So but I enjoy my part-time career, to be fair. It was probably the right time. I think I was 32. Sometimes it's just time. It's like leaving Bristol Rovers after 10 years. Sometimes people say, oh, well, we shouldn't have left, or we shouldn't have left, but sometimes it's just time. It was probably the right time in my life to go to play part-time football, because I then supplement my income and sort of fill my time with coaching. So I learnt to coach then and play, and it's difficult, and this is why it's difficult sometimes getting into coaching, because the money's not really there. If you're playing part-time football and earning reasonable money, your coaching money is something that sort of supplements it, then all well and good, but it's hard to get into coaching because, like I say, the money's not there and you have to commit a lot of time to it, and to become a better coach there's even more time commitment, and if you need to pay the bills, that doesn't always balance up particularly well.
And how did you find kind of that transition of going, actually, you know what, coaching is probably something I'm going to go into, I'm going to really pursue this? Were there people that you spoke to, or was it just something you fell in, you were playing and you ended up coaching? Or
I think it's just one of those things that, a bit like my playing career really, I just want to be better at it. And when you first start, like you started more recently than I did, and you just it's how do I be better? Because you want success in anything that you do, really, I think. So you want your sessions to flow. However you measure success in your session, then sometimes we've all done it in sessions. Oh, that's hard. That didn't work. That wasn't right. And then you got to think about it. Think, well, why didn't it?
Yeah.
And sometimes you're asking the players too much. Sometimes your communication's not good enough. Sometimes the setup's not right, the area's not right, and this is all the sort of stuff that you learn as an experienced coach. Then you make less mistakes, and then you improve, and it just takes time. The top coaches spend a lot of time thinking about it and a lot of time on the grass as well. It's just me. I think I just wanted to be better at it, really. So I started at it and was probably okay at it. Like to think I've got better. Hopefully I have. I might stop getting my cards pretty soon. Otherwise I won't be paying the bills.
And I'm assuming you enjoyed it when you first made that transition. You enjoyed
I used to like the games as much as anything, because I think, and you probably back me up on this, one of the most rewarded things is to see something that you've added to your team or to a player come out in a game, because that's a genuine sort of sign that you've actually done something for the team or that individual, or helped them with. So you've been working on combination play and training. If you see that on a match day when it's real, I think that's really satisfying. You don't get any more money, you don't get any more bonuses, do you? And winning's not the be all and end all, but that's your reward. And come the end of the season, when kind of a showcase of your work over the year, really, if your team is playing a way that you think that's how the game should be played, then you take some satisfaction from that.
And then I guess looking over that period of time and trying to develop your way and your style and stuff, did you have CPD type events that you used to go on? Did you try and steal ideas from other people? Did you use experiences of previous clubs?
My experience as a player was so different to what it is now, and I've had to change from that, because spoke about Harry Redknapp a little bit before. Some of the things he said to me that were quite scary, quite direct, and blunt. One of them was if you don't get 5 yards quicker, you might as well just forget it. And that was after a game. And then you go home and think about it, cry a little bit, and think, shit, I dread it now. But that's the truth of the matter. And I don't think that bluntness now is accepted, and probably isn't right. Although back in the day, it probably worked for me. Because he told me the truth, and I thought, okay. In fairness to him, the next day I came in training, he said, look, go down to the sports shop, buy yourself some spikes. The club will buy them, get yourself some spikes, and do some sprinting after training every day, because obviously with spikes your heels can't touch the floor, because of it's about running on your toes and that. And that's what he was trying to give me. So he helped me, the directness, and then obviously the softer approach afterwards helped me. I have been too direct and too blunt as a coach, that's for sure, can't deny that. But I have changed a little bit, I've mellowed a little bit. But I still believe that you need to tell people the truth. If something's not good enough, then there's a way of saying it, but I think you've got to tell them that. Rather than sort of beating around the bush a little bit, or letting people think that that's okay. Because come the day, they'll find out it's not right, and I think they probably would then say, I wish you told me that wasn't good enough, because then I could have worked on it. If you don't tell them, then they can't work on it, they can't concentrate on it.
And how do you develop those skills as a coach over those 20 years? How have you
probably from watching other people. Shay's quite calm. Other coaches I've seen work are calm as well, and I've probably learnt from that. CPD events probably haven't taught me that much, if I'm honest. The best ones I've seen, when I was at Bristol Rovers doing the job there, I used to go up to Reading quite a lot and watch people like Dick Bate work, and just watch them deliver a session. And I think that's probably the best way of learning. For me, the best way is to just literally watch someone deliver a session and pick bits out of it, pick out their ideas, pick out the session, copy the session sometimes. In terms of being in a classroom and you're in a group and putting down your ideas and that, it's second best really for me. I think I'd rather see people go out and actually work, do it.
And then the question, this is something I wanted to ask you when I knew you were coming on. You've got a game scenario, you're about to kick off. What's your thought process in the first 5-10 minutes of the game? What are you looking at? What are you thinking about?
Something I ask my players to do as well, work out what formation you're playing against to start off with. So we talk about that. Have they taken on board what I've asked them to do before the game? Are they doing the things, or does it look like we can or are doing the things that we've been working on? And how, I think within the first 5 minutes you kind of get an idea of how the game's going to go. So I always ask them to start in a way that's going to disturb your opposition rather than being disturbed yourselves. If we look disturbed, then that concerns me a little bit. But then I start looking at people and saying, well, there's your problem, resolve it. Find out how you do it. And this is why I talk about sort of my philosophy, coaching philosophy, if you like, is can players solve their own problems rather than getting to half time when it's probably too late, or you get down and you give them the answers. There's your problem. Have you recognised what the problem is first and foremost, and then how do you solve it?
What's interesting is because when I spoke to Che about you previously, one of the things he says you're best at is during games is analysing what's going on,
right,
and trying to solve what problems the opposition and stuff are using.
Yeah.
So obviously the fact that you're saying that's a big focus for you and your coaching for your players, obviously it's something that you must talk about a lot. The fact that other coaches that have worked with you or watch you and say.
And again, I've probably done that because I have watched coaches work, and like even when I've played, although I didn't play for many really good coaches, I think Jerry Francis knew everything. If you conceded a goal, he'd go back 4 or 5 passes and say that's why that happened, and he wouldn't blame one person. He said there's 3 mistakes for every goal, so you didn't do that, you didn't do that, and you didn't do that. So it's not like a shared responsibility, as my sort of thing. But listen to people, and like when we listen to them on the television, it's easy now on the television. You listen to people like Jose Mourinho, who doesn't give away much sometimes, but they're constantly working out what's going on, and like at their level, and we all aspire to be at the best level, and you just wonder what goes on in a dressing room at half time. But they must analyse, to the quite a precise level what the opposition is doing, and then they've got an answer quite quickly of, well, they're doing that, we need to do that. And it's not a precise answer to every problem. Sometimes you just got to work harder, and that's one thing we forget sometimes. Sometimes coaches think, well, they're playing that way, they're doing that, so if we do this, we'll win the game. It's not the case always. So a lot of elements go into winning a game and being successful. But so like I say, going back to that point, I think the best coaches, quite quickly work out what the opposition's doing, and once you've done that, you can start thinking about a way of overcoming that.
And then I guess in terms of you moving forward, what do you aspire to do? What would you like to do? Have you got any plans? Or are you kind of happy with?
Well, I think I've been an under-18 coach now for most of my coaching career. I've done sort of younger stuff. I've done some older stuff. I think under-18s is my age group. If I'd probably had the opportunity to work with older players earlier in my career, then maybe that would be different. I think we can get pigeonholed, but I think sometimes most coaches have an area where they're strong. Younger groups I can work with. I think there's less satisfaction in that, so I probably get the satisfaction and reward from under-18s football that I want, and I probably can offer as much to under-18s, probably more than I can at other levels. So I just think this is my level, and I'll do as well as I can in it. I mean, I'd like to achieve things. We got to the second round of the FA Youth Cup this year, which grand scheme of things might not sound like a lot, but for us it's quite an achievement. Before, we've been in a few finals before. I'd like to win that league, and again, that's something that's sort of fairly unnoticeable for a lot of people, but for us it would be quite a huge thing, and it's a challenge. It's a target for us, or target for me really, I guess, because the players sort of come and go quite quickly, so they don't have that long-term vision. But I still want to win things, and people say as a coach, it's not about winning or about players that we coach and focus on winning, but we need to have some part of us that focuses on winning. And I think if your motivation is not to win the league you're in, then that's a little bit missing an opportunity, I think.
And the players might pick up on that as well, particularly at your age group, if they
I agree that there's with younger age groups, the idea of having to, we can get it wrong if people are pushing them to, almost do anything to win, then that's wrong. It's the same at my level, really. To do anything to win is wrong, but win by doing the right things is something we should all be aspiring to.
I guess the last question, and I've asked this to everyone, who's been the best player or coach you worked with or against, and why?
I don't think I can answer that. I don't know. Jerry Francis was probably the most astute in terms of analysing games. John Ward was another manager that was pretty diligent in what he did. So whenever you played, whoever you played, he knew everything about the opposition. So that was a coaching trait, a management trait. Probably the best coach I would say that when I did my A licence was Martin Hunter. He was good at what he did. Like, very enthusiastic, very bubbly, quite a good sense of humour, but lots of energy in what he did, and seemed to know everything you needed to know, pretty much. He wouldn't have to think for an answer about almost any question. That's how it seemed. You ask him anything, he just knew the answer, because he'd been there, done it, he had the experience, and it was pretty good. Kenny Swain was good in a different way, probably had the answers but quieter, probably someone to speak to one-to-one, quite approachable, would give you the time as well. So he was good. Steve Rutter has done some CPD stuff that I've been on, and again seems to know everything. Very intelligent man. So yeah, probably those. But in terms of who I've worked for or worked alongside, I don't know.
No, it's perfect.
Okay.
Well, Bill, I appreciate your time. Thanks very much for that.
Thank
Cheers.
You,
Thanks for listening to the Sports Initiative podcast with me, Michael Wright. Please remember to follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram at the Sports Initiative Podcast, and share this podcast with friends and family. I'll see you next week.